So I'm going to wait maybe another 3 minutes or so to see if we get a last minute flurry of folks. And
sounds good.
it could be a lot like my classes. The second you start the lecture was when everyone comes in, you know? They go down. So we have 14 people RSVP'd, but I'm not sure how many of it includes our own people. I don't know. I forgot to tell our folks that they didn't need to RSVP, so. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and get started because I think the usual rule is that the second I get started, we'll have a bunch of people come in. Well, I think I actually know everybody here, I believe. So, so I guess you all know that I'm Belinda Lem. I'm the new chief negotiator for LRCFT. Generally speaking, in terms of the forum, I want to. There's a lot of everything that you saw in the memo that I sent out to everybody. I have on a PowerPoint slide. So what I plan to do is just go through a couple at a time, and if there are questions, feel free to just either raise your hand and ask the question, or put it in the chat box. And I'll ask Jason and James if you see questions that I need to stop for, just to go ahead and let me know, because I can't see the chat box once I go into full presenter mode here. So absolutely feel free to interrupt, etc. Hold on, a bunch of people are texting me, which probably means, oh, never mind. A couple of people were like, where's the link? And they just found it. So, so let me go ahead and get into slideshow mode here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for taking out your Monday and coming by and coming to this contract negotiations forum. A little different from how we normally do it. I wanted to start by acknowledging our negotiations team. As you'll see, our members of the negotiating team basically get a point two to help out with negotiating. And one of the things I will say, sort of characteristically speaking, is that they all put in a lot more time than a point two. And I think that this is important to acknowledge. And we did our best from a representative standpoint to make sure that not only do we have people who serve as the officers of the union, but also represent particular interests around distance ed or the sciences, part-timers, career tech, and as I'm sure, and counseling, as I'm sure you could tell, it's hard to try to make sure we cover all of our stakeholders, but these folks really worked really hard under less than optimal circumstances to make this negotiations go. As I noted in the emails that I've sent out, that trying to negotiate when the budget is uncertain at best is definitely less than ideal. But the good thing for us is that our contract is a living document. And for example, if there's additional monies in the in-between cycle, we have the ability to negotiate those things via MOU in between to try to make improvements. So let's say the budget outlook ends up being less dire next year than they think, and there's extra ongoing money, then these are things that we can go after relative to salary or what we're hearing in terms of helping offset the increase to potential increases to medical benefits. We don't have a number yet, but we are not surprisingly looking at a potential increase in our out-of-pocket. But right now, there's very little in terms of ongoing money. There may be some dollars in terms of one-time dollars, but we're monitoring the situation as closely as we can. We expect to have greater clarity in January, and we commit to continuing to communicate about that as we move forward. So I'm going to just go through a few sections at a time, and basically by article, and just feel free to either, like I said, ask questions or type in questions as we go. The first article is Article 2 around salaries. Very oddly, as I'm sure you know, we have things like chair eligibility under salaries, which I think has to do with sort of assignment and stipend. But what we had to do last year is basically to make some modifications to who's eligible. If you look in the contract around 2.2.4, you'll see there's this laundry list of who's eligible to serve as chair. We had to make some modifications here because for small departments in particular. And here, there are a few people who are eligible, who become eligible under this much further down the list. If no other faculty member, no department faculty meet the requirements in the previous section, first and second year tenure track faculty shall be eligible as a potential candidate. And then also under a single member department format, area deans of a single full-time faculty department whose full-time faculty member volunteers for the position shall recommend that member. So basically this is just for small departments. The piece that I think is a little bit more applicable to faculty is this MOU this is an MOU that we signed in about a year and a half ago. Is regular faculty who are off contract and are not otherwise released from a summer assignment who serve on a hire committee during the summer may count this time as either college service or be compensated for scheduled hire committee meetings and interviews. And the compensation will be B2, B3 salary schedule, class 1, step 1. So basically, if you come in to do summer hiring committees, you'll be compensated. It'll buy a lunch or two for you, but there is the potential for compensation if you decide to come in when you're off contract.
Greg has a question.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So I see not otherwise released or not released from the summer assignment. Does that mean that if they wanted to save money, they could say, oh, you know what, you're teaching this summer, so we're going to give you a slight release from your summer load so you can participate in this hiring committee, thereby potentially limiting the members of hiring committees to people who are already teaching in the summer.
Jason or James? My understanding is that theoretically they could ask you, they could offer to get you a sub, or let's say you're teaching a class, they could get you a sub. There's also the issue of how counselor schedules, I think, work for people who are on the 174 schedule. Those get scheduled differently than classrooms. So I think it would be making sure that you are absolutely like off contract in those regards. Jason or James, did you want to add in?
I agree that the sub would be the district's response to that, to the first part of that question.
Thanks.
Yeah, James?
No, nothing to add, sorry.
And I think the other thing is that there are some faculty who get contracted for the summer to do special projects. Theoretically, I was going to say the coordinators probably should have been designated as one of those groups this past summer, but people who sign on for very specific special projects that they can release you from. So there's a handful of things. It's not just like if you teach class, we know people take on special projects, but if you're teaching, it would be the cost of a sub. During the last contract cycle, we had LRCCD and LRCFT had agreed to do a had agreed to do a feasibility study. It did not get completed. I believe we only finished half of it. and that the idea here would be to extend benefits to partners of retirees and retiring adjunct faculty. So what we did is we opted to extend this tentative agreement for another 3 years to see if we get that pilot done, provided that there's money to do so. Again, doing the study is not the same as actually signing it into agreement, but we would want to know what are the financial implications. The other side of that, though, is also that there may be a lot of other things higher up in the pecking order that cost money. So, for example, any contemplating this would get measured against salary, family leave, and a number of other issues. But we would want, this is basically saying we would do the actuarial study. Workload, here we have, I think it's important to note that maybe one of the most contentious parts of our negotiations had to do with things related to equity. Not surprisingly, I think the district and the union share an interest in promoting equity, but where we diverge is in how to get there. In our opinion, the district's approach focuses a little bit too much on optics and a little bit too much on punitive action rather than calling people into the work of equity. And our team, the work you won't see is that our team had to fend off a number of really, I'm going to call it I would say like a broad overreach, in our opinion, on a number of changes, including changes to our professional standards, our professional obligations, et cetera. So our goal as a union was to, on the one hand, support equity work, but on the other hand, make sure that we do it in a way that we feel is in line with how this work should be done, and without putting a disproportionate workload on particular groups of people. So I'm going to start with the college service section. What you're going to see is that we've added what is now going to be called the College Service and Compliance Training Form. The college, as some of you know, we used to have a college service form which had sunsetted in 2017. Now it's important to note that LRCFT had agreed to keep the college service form in, but because of an administrative error on their part, it never got updated in the contract, so then it went away. And so we agreed to reinstate the college service form, and it expands activities to reflect both anti-racist and equity-related work. It also deletes the sexual harassment prevention training and mandated reporter training from service, and we'll move it into a new compliance training section. So I'm going to go through the contract changes, and then I'm going to show you the mock-up of the form. We've also now created a new section on this form that's called Mandatory Compliance Training Section. Faculty are expected to remain current on their trainings by completing the trainings when notified that their certification has expired. If you're like me and scheduled to go this year, you have had multiple emails from Valerie Kerrigan saying it's time to update your prevention training. This is also true. Our understanding is that the mandatory reporter training, you may only, if you are in one of the areas that you need to take this, and I imagine this is like early childhood education. There's some discussion about, with all the dual enrollment ramp up, about whether all of us have to take it, but know that that's a work in progress. But the idea here is that we carved out that every year your service obligation will be reduced by 2 hours to 178 hours from 180 hours every year, regardless of whether you're scheduled to update your trainings or not. So I think what I want to note here is that number one is this is going to be a nightmare for the counseling chairs / counseling deans. But counselors are entitled to schedule these 2 compliance hours every year at their discretion, whether they are scheduled to take their training or not. For those of us who are kind of instructional faculty, and I think the same goes for librarians and nurses, we have a little bit more flexibility there, but basically our service obligation goes down by 2 hours. And so let me go ahead and show you the new form. This form we're piloting for this contract cycle. Oops, sorry. We're piloting for this contract cycle in case, basically in case it doesn't work. So give me a second here. Do I need to make this a little larger? Is it okay? Yeah, okay. So what you'll see is it looks pretty familiar for most folks. What I want to highlight is we've made a few additions here around equity. Activities related to closing the opportunity gaps for students, faculty, and staff, particularly African American, Black, Mexican American, Latinx, and Native American. And that you can do this through equity institutes and workshops, collegial equity coaching and advocacy, mentoring students of color, recruiting and hiring that focus on historically marginalized and underrepresented groups. So one of the things I want to point out here is that one of the things that we've heard repeatedly, especially from faculty of color, but also especially women in the sciences, although it's not exclusive to them, is that there's a lot of informal work that we do, the relational work that we do, that doesn't get accounted for as college service. The hallway conversations, the mentoring, all those things that were, they're oftentimes not accounted for, and in the end up feeling like a little bit of a tax on individuals, that you do this extra work and you're not compensated for. So our team really advocated to broaden out some of these categories to account for that relational work that isn't often captured. You'll note that also anti-racism activities here. These can be, for many of our faculty, we do a lot of social justice and advocacy work around, both in the communities that we serve and that align with Los Rios's mission. And so this could be community service work that you do in which you're representing the college or that you work for, or the district. A lot of it is that sometimes when we show up into spaces, we become sort of experts in the field. And so they also know that we're professors. And so that is college service work. And so these are some of the changes that we made to the form. Sorry. All the rest has stayed relatively the same here as we go down. And then I want to go down here to this part. So what we've done is we've created a compliance training section where you basically would check off that you've finished these trainings. It's important to note that PeopleSoft has a back door that says if you finished, I don't know if it's considered a back door, but it certainly shows whether or not you've finished the compliance training. That's how they track that. And so this is what you would be checking off. And so this particular structure was important, particularly to the district, because one of the things that was on the table that I'll talk about later is wanting mandatory equity trainings or mandatory equity training program. And so this particular structure, we would rename the section, allows for a carve out of time. I think, Greg, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I wonder if you could share your thought process on why the service form does not have hours attached to it. It's just a checklist, and what are there pros and cons for why we didn't have hours?
That's actually a little bit more of a historical question. Jason or James, do you want to maybe give a little bit more of the history on this?
Sure. This was the way the form was. This is what we bargained in the past, that faculty are professionals and that we weren't going to agree to have folks have to punch the clock on their college service work. And district, and that I wouldn't even call it a fight. That conversation happened two cycles ago. And so in our stating it, they didn't push hard to, there was a little bit of a push, but we pushed back that the faculty are professionals, they'll check it. If somebody says, they did Senate work and that's 180 hours, that it's the job of the administration to tell someone that no matter what you did for them, it probably didn't equal this. But that's for conversations with a dean, so we wanted it to stay the same. We didn't know how faculty would feel about its reinstatement, so we certainly didn't want to make it more onerous than it already was in the past.
I think the other thing, sorry, got a fire truck going by here. I think the other thing that we've really tried to stay true to is that that flex and college service should be faculty directed. I think the other thing that we opened that if in putting down the hours, the con side of putting the hours down is that it gave the deans approval over what you could and could not do. They did come back with a proposal to us that they should be able to assign service, to which we said no. We believe that part of what needs to happen, and it works better in some departments than others, and we know this, is that the culture of some departments, everyone does their part, and it's not a thing. Whereas in other departments, it's a battle. And I think that for part of our stance is that part of the dean's job is to help work through the issues of any given department that is not, where members of the team are not doing, or members of the faculty are not doing their work, that through performance review, this should be noted. And so I think that's been sort of our historical stance. But yeah, we weren't sure. We know that 6 years ago when this was first introduced?
Yeah.
It was a big fight, and my understanding, and this is right before I came here. So, in general, my understanding is that the faculty did not like the service form to begin with. So we decided to not go with dates and times and all that sort of piece, and we kept it as is, but expanded the categories that were in it. Does that sort of answer your question there, Greg?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, let me get back to the other. Sorry. Okay, so then the next two articles, we're basically getting rid of the sunset language. We've made permanent in the contract the incremental load increase for oversized classes. If you remember, prior to prior to this past contract, you would only be paid if you were 85 students or above at census. So you would get double credit for the class. We created an incremental increase at, I guess, if you have 55 at census, you get an additional 0.25, et cetera, et cetera. So we made that permanent in the contract. It also makes online office hours options permanent by deleting the contract language as well, deleting the pilot language as well. So here's one that I think is going to be really important, is that in Article 4, we now have a minimum eligibility to teach online. And I want to emphasize two things here, that this is a floor and not a ceiling, meaning that by establishing this minimum eligibility, it does not actually necessarily mean that faculty do not have to do additional work in order to meet the standards of performance review. So this establishes a minimum eligibility in order to accept an online assignment. Faculty who have taught online for 1 semester are eligible to teach online across the district. Actually, this should be taught online for 1 semester for Los Rios, are eligible to teach online across the district. In other words, what the district is saying is that anyone, because of COVID, who is teaching online is eligible to teach. This also establishes a professional development training program that fulfills the eligibility requirement. This program can be taken concurrently with a first online assignment. And so here it's going to be a 15-hour program. It's a 15-hour training that can be counted towards flex or college service or 1 unit of class advancement for full-time faculty. Adjunct faculty can choose to be compensated for completion of the training through either a non-load attributable stipend for 15 hours of training at Schedule B Class 2 Step 1 rate, 1 unit of class advancement, or to meet an existing flex obligation. So it's also important to note that any faculty, even if any faculty who feels that they still need additional training at the minimum level of how to use Canvas, how to teach an online class, is eligible to take this training. But really what we're doing moving forward is standardizing the training or the minimum eligibility across the district. There were a number of things that came up that informed us advocating for this. Is number one, for part-time faculty or for faculty who are choosing to do an online overload, a full-time faculty member doing online overload at another campus. There were 4 campuses and 4 different requirements for what you do to meet eligibility. One of the campuses had 40 hours, others it was a little bit more on a mentorship basis, one-on-one basis. Another campus, it was about 20 hours. So this now standardizes it across the board. What was particularly hard on our part-time faculty is that all of these trainings were uncompensated. And so they would have to do multiple trainings to be able to be eligible to teach across the district. And we're not being compensated for it. I think I saw a hand go up.
That was me.
Tracy, yeah, go ahead.
So I just had a question, and maybe you're getting to it. Who's going to be in charge of the training? Is it going to be the same training across the district, or is each college going to have their own training session? Those are my questions.
My understanding is that the coordinators, and Greg, I'm just going to call you in since you're on this call, but the coordinators at the 4 campuses are developing one training that can be taken, I believe, asynchronously with some parts of it overlapping with some coaching. It will be offered at all 4 campuses, but you can also, because it's now standardized, let's say the timeline at your home college doesn't work, you should be able to sign up for that training and take it as affiliated with another college. Although right now my understanding is it's going to run as a district-wide training. Greg, are you part of that group? I can't remember.
No, because I'm serving as Senate president right now. My DE coordinator is a very small part of my load. But the DE coordinators as a group, the LMS coordinators are working on that. I am aware of what Belinda mentioned about how different things have been across the district for many, many years. And so I am grateful that our adjunct faculty in particular won't have to go through repeated things. I hope that we get to a place where this is also acknowledged across the state, because when adjunct faculty try to teach in different districts, it's the same problem in different ways. So thank you for making it standardized again, particularly for adjunct faculty.
The other thing we wanted to note is that they didn't, we asked for a list of what other credentials we've historically been accepting. Like if you've taught online previously at another college that uses the same learning management system, et cetera, they weren't able to produce a list right away, but our intention is that when we get a fuller list of those types of credentials, we plan to sign an MOU that will basically add on other ways to be eligible other than having taught at Los Rios. So because, for example, I think about like the new adjuncts that might be coming in to teach the statistics class in psychology, and they've already been teaching that stats class at San Joaquin Delta. Under the current contract, they would have to go through this training, but quite honestly, probably have the credentials to do so right away. So just know that the hard part is we were dealing with a truncated timeline, but also our team was trying to adhere to the fact that we aren't going to sign into contract things that are hypothetical. So, so know that we intend to get a list, and we will publicize that as soon as we'll send out an update to folks about what those other credentials look like. And I think more importantly, we will make sure we circulate that out to the departments via the department chairs, councils, et cetera, at the different colleges. Is there a question in the chat? I can't quite tell.
Yeah, does this training count for flex or college service?
Your choice. So you can choose to offset your flex, or towards your college service hours, or 1 unit of class advancement for full-time faculty. And for adjunct faculty, and it's basically you make the choice as a faculty member what you want it to count for. Same thing with adjunct faculty, but they actually have a compensated, they have compensation for those hours because obviously they don't have college service obligations. So they do have a compensation for completion. I believe when we did the math on that, that's roughly about $600 pre-tax. Any other questions, on this particular item? We could always go back to it at the end. I have plenty of other spaces there. Article 4 under adjunct faculty, we had some clarification language. Evidently throughout the contract, we called the faculty availability/preference form all sorts of different names, and so we standardized that. I think the key factor here is that we've extended the 0.6 preference load pilot through June 2023. 3 years ago, We wrote this into contract, although it was a delayed start. The district still had a lot of questions about how this impacts assignment and load and those types of things. But our sense has been that it's actually really hard to achieve the 0.6 preference because you have to be just about perfect. Only 35 people in the entire district have earned the 0.6 preference. But what we've done is extend this pilot through June 2023. The new one that I think is going to be incredibly important, especially in this budgetary time, is that individuals who work as long-term temporary faculty members can use the time related to this assignment towards earning or maintaining preference at the college providing the LTT assignment. Before, the only benefit attached to the LTT was that if you became a full-time, if you become a full-time faculty member, you could use that year towards step and class, towards step placement, but you'd obviously have to become a full-time faculty member first. So we've added in the ability to maintain or gain preference. We initially had wanted to be able to also add step increments to this, but then it was gonna, when we did the math on benefits and other things, it was going to be really messy, and so we ended up taking that particular piece off the table. Greg.
Thank you. So I know that our adjunct faculty usually work at 0.2 or 0.4. I'm thinking of my discipline that I teach in. And I wonder if there was any thought to making, if they had the opportunity to serve as an LTT, whether or not those semesters would count double towards preference, since they're in effect teaching roughly double what they're normally allowed to.
Our part-timers did propose a number of different things, and we proposed a number of things, and this is sort of where we ended up landing. But I think that what we may be able to do is pay attention to that and look at our LTTs expanding in this next 2 years, and if we have to, maybe make it a proposal like that, Greg. So this was sort of our foot in the door, as you will.
Yeah, I think it's especially important if we are, as long as we are in a hiring freeze and we're not hiring regular faculty, if we're doing a bunch of long-term temps, then we shouldn't lose the opportunity for them.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, we'll take note of that. This was definitely like our foot in the door to make sure that there was something that helped folks that was a little bit more concrete than if you become full-time faculty, but who knows how long our hiring freeze is going to last. So, we updated, so what was interesting is that we had made some changes to the online, to adjunct office hours that's the contract language didn't match up, that made it into the form, but didn't make it into the contract. Essentially, adjunct faculty with a minimum of a 0.2 but below a 0.4 can be basically do office hours, but they have a choice as to whether or not they would like to do 9 or 18 hours. And I think this made the form. The one that actually needed to be updated was the second one, is adjunct faculty maintaining a minimum of a 0.4 FTE assignment can do office hours of 9, 18, 27, or 36 hours. Because we know that a number of our part-time faculty will do this as a second job or maintaining assignments all over the place in multiple places. So they couldn't commit to just 18 or 36, but we wanted to give them the option. And I believe the decision to go by multiples of 9 was something to do with the finance office. Does anyone remember? James, is that right?
Yeah, that was from HR that it made things very confusing if one could just pick any hour between 9 and 36. So by having set hours, they can set things up in such a way that it's a lot easier to monitor, maintain, and make sure folks are compensated correctly.
Yeah, and so I think the big change in for those of you who may know people with a 0.4 or above, I believe the 9 and 27 option were missing off of the form. And so we just updated the contract to either reflect the form, and then vice versa. We changed the form, updated the form to make sure it reflected the intent. So not surprisingly, if any of you even opened up that red line version, you can see how some of these things get a little kind of mixed up in process. So this is an update. Okay, so here's another big change. And again, going back to our discussions around equity, one of the things that we've done is to create a mandatory equity reflection for all faculty. So this is all faculty categories, part-timers and full-timers. And I'll show you the form in just a second. The document is turned in at the same time as the self-study during performance review. It's important to note that we have kept it out of the formal performance review process. So we're inviting people to think about their practice. We're inviting folks to think about what they need in terms of tools, but we didn't want them to necessarily be judged on something that is a reflection. Now, that being said, that there are places within the self-study that it's totally okay for you to repeat what you put in the reflection in the self-study if you so choose. But the reflection itself cannot be used to support a rating of less than satisfactory. The equity reflection asks all faculty to think about the work they have done and plan to do related to equity. And we basically have put pilot language on this because we're not sure what will work and what doesn't. So give me a second here while I flip over to the other. This, I believe, is the last page of that PDF I sent out to all faculty. I put sample because I don't know what the final format is going to look like, but what's most important, what's most important is the questions that we have here. What have you done to improve your understanding of anti-racism, equity, equity-mindedness, and/or equity as it relates to your field and the LRCCD? This might include, but is not limited to, the following: curriculum review related to anti-racism, decolonization, and equity, participation in anti-racism and equity-related workshops and institutes, review of professional materials and best practices for equity in your field, and/or review of your student success data. Question 2 is really about application. So how have you used or how will you use these understandings to improve your practice and or to help close opportunity gaps? And third, and this piece for us was really important, one of our central arguments with the district has been is that while you're asking faculty to do more across the board on equity, there has not been a realignment of equity dollars to meet that need or to provide that infrastructure for training. And so we basically said what additional trainings and resources, whether offered by LRCCD or others, would be helpful for continuing your development of anti-racist practices. So for us, what was really important is that we wanted to build in a mechanism where they couldn't say, well, we didn't know what faculty needed, wanted, et cetera, is that we actually have a mechanism for looking at these things. Are there questions on the equity reflection piece here?
Yeah, this is Greg with a question. So I think in a couple of years, 3 years, whatever, we're going to have this tremendous trove of data points of what we faculty want for this. And I hope that the whoever collects that, I'm guessing it's going to be the district because it's part of the self-studies, that they will make that data available to the appropriate, professional development folks, and so that our training in equity can reflect what the faculty say that they want, what we faculty say that we want in how to do equity training.
Yeah, I think that's important. And also, this is where I also was going to say that we do have an potential mandatory equity training program, MOU, where we will visit some logistics of this. I think one of the notes that we can take down, but also because this is going to run back through Senate, is that we also should add in that this reflection should be used to think about how we develop that program and what trainings people are eligible in terms of equity growth. But yeah, we agree that there should be a systematic collection of that, but hopefully it doesn't turn out like what they did with the college service piece. This has also been another argument we've had with the district, is that they argue that faculty aren't doing their service. And we said, where's your proof? Tell us how, right? And so, and then we also know that across the district, not everyone has actually collected the college service forms, even when it was implemented. So it's sort of one of those very weird compliance issues, but yeah, we could definitely advocate for it.
We have something in the chat. It was noted in bullet 2, the second sentence, that refection should have an L added to it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Someone write that down so I remember to.
Got it.
The real question is it also misspelled in the memo? Because I thought I was cutting and pasting, so now I'm gonna have to go back to both. Oh, and also just so you know, the equity reflection statement is going to be in the Appendix E and F. It'll be appendices E1 and F1, I believe.